Welcome to another episode of The Panel. If you'd like to be a part of the conversation in future videos, make sure to follow the Twitch channel to be notified when we go live. And without further ado, let's get to the discussion. I'm just not naturally a very politically inclined person. Like, I do realize it's important to stay up to date on current events and all things like that, and I'm not in any way diminishing that. I just feel that I feel that if in politics, there's a lot of things you can't change, and if you're not, like, yes, I can vote for certain things and that's cool, but like, if I'm not directly involved with like as a government official or whatever, like, it's hard to really make a big difference. So I try to, and the thing about politics too is there's so much cynicism in politics that if I watch Fox News or CNN too long, if I fill my mind, like, what goes in comes out, and if I fill my mind with that cynicism, with that negativity, with everything you hear on the news is just negative, it depresses you, it gets you down. Like, I'm not saying that you should live oblivious to the world around you, but at the same time, you need to kind of like clear your mind of like outside voices. Like, you just kind of need to shut out all the voices in your life and just focus on, okay, what do I want to accomplish with my life? What are my goals? What are the things that I'm passionate about? What do I want to accomplish? And to an extent, I'm not saying be disconnected or whatever, but I just feel like you have to come to a point where no matter, like, there can be a storm around you, and no matter what the noise is around you, you kind of have to like have your own path and your own, because if you just listen to everything the media feeds you, first of all, you never know when you're going to get fed the truth or lies. The media always lies. They want to present their agenda. They want to present the things that they want you to believe. So it's such a difficult thing to, and I'll get to your question in just a second, or to the topic in just a second, but just want to say this, like, there's so much noise that it's so difficult to decipher the truth nowadays that, like, to an extent, I feel like you have to figure out the truth for yourself. You can't rely on, like, basically all these sources. And yes, I'm not a Republican. I'm a little bit more on the conservative side. I can't speak right now. But I'm not really, like, I'm not on the extreme. Like, I try to always be objective and see both sides and things like that. But I just try not to involve myself too much, because the world of politics is such a dirty, nasty world that it's just like, there's just so much lies and backstabbing, and it's all power. Everyone's trying to gain power, and they will say anything they need to say just to get a powerful position, and it's just such a mess. You just don't know who you can trust in politics. So even the news sources, the news outlets, they don't care about the truth. They care about ratings and to come out with a big story, right? No matter if their big story is completely like just a lie, even if their big story is just fabricated, even though so it's not about the truth. It's everything you see on the media about politics is about clicks, their agenda, their views, clicks, being on the headlines, right? Being on the front page of whatever. And so it's such a distorted view of the world, and it's just not, so to an extent, like, I'm not saying don't watch the news, I'm not saying don't see what's going on in the world, but at the same time, you have to kind of like see what the extreme right is saying and what the extreme left is saying, and realize that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, and kind of come to your own conclusions. Like, don't just believe everything you hear. All right, so you said, okay, let's discuss how 13% of the U.S. population constitutes 50% or 52% of crime.
If you'd like me to help you understand that, I can elaborate on what he's saying.
Mm-hmm. I think I get it, but what do you think he's saying?
Man, working at an HR company, what can I say? he is referring to a particular subset of the population that is broken down to by race, is convicted of 52% of all crimes in the United States.
I mean, I don't know what too much to say about that, but I mean, there's bad people out there and there's good people out there, and well, I mean, there's, you know, people that don't respect or obey the law, and there's people that do, and it's just as simple as that. Like,
can I clarify something for you real quick? I'll put it this way to help you save face a little bit, because you're walking blind into a potential trap.
Okay.
The statement of, you know, some people are good and some people are bad. People of all walks of life. Mm-hmm. There are good people and there are bad people that fall into every single category of every subset of person. Mm-hmm. So to look at just a particular percentage of our population and to say that they aren't as good of good people, or there are more than fair share of bad people, I don't think is fair to say.
Okay.
I would just phrase it this way. That good people and bad people exist, and that just because there is a percentage of crime that's accounted for, those are convicted and those are tried. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily take into consideration of all crimes that may or may not have been caught.
Yeah. And I will say this, when it comes to crime and things like that, I feel like people try to make it about race, and I think they're looking at the wrong thing. I think that the right way to look at it is, I think there's a correlation between two main factors. There's a lot of factors, but I'm just going to go into two real quick. Two main factors that I feel like contribute to higher crime rates or whatever is, one, education. Where there is no education or just very little education, doesn't matter the race, doesn't matter the gender, whatever, people are a little more barbaric, more primitive, more just whatever you want to call it. But and then, so education is one thing, and the other thing is how well off they are, the poverty line, I guess. So
their socioeconomic status. So when you combine those two things, usually the pattern that I see is when there's lack of education and lack of resources, when people don't have, or when people are in a state of fighting for their resources, it's kind of like if you put a rat in a cage and you feed it, right? You put food there for the rat, and the rat will eat that food, drink the water that you provide. The rat gets full. It just chills, sits down in a corner, and just kind of hangs out, right? Well, if you don't feed that rat, and that rat just stays there in that cage, well, eventually that rat is going to get so desperate that it's going to start chewing at the cage to try to get out, or, there's like a torture method that you see in movies where they put a rat like on the guy's stomach, and they put like a bowl or like a metal bucket or something on it, and the rat, and then they heat up the thing, right? And so whenever they heat it up, the rat has to escape, and so it'll literally chew through the person as a torture method. And so the point is, like, the person gets their insides eaten from the inside out. So I think there's like a correlation between that. So where there's poverty, people are more likely to. Now, I'm not saying all people. There's poor people that they live within their means, and they have their own. They manage and they figure out what they need to do. Maybe they don't buy as many fancy things. They just buy some rice and beans and live off of that. But when we live in the thing about America, and I see this all the time where people try to compare America to other countries. Well, the whole thing about the United States is we live in such a Hollywood society, right, where everything is about keeping up with the Joneses. It's about your economic status is like a big part of who you are. So you have to have the biggest, best, nicest things, like the newest technology, the best cars, right? And so whenever you live in a society like that, but at the same time you have like poverty, and you don't have the education to tell you, hey, maybe I should work for these things, and maybe I should just get a good education, get a good job, get paid, and then I'll eventually have these things that my neighbors have. That's where the education factor plays in. But whenever then they don't have that education, and then they also don't have the resources, then it's like, oh my gosh, I just read your comment, PBT.
Ribs is what he meant to say.
Right, okay. That's pretty funny. But whenever they don't have that education and then they don't have the resources, then they're kind of like the rat in a cage that you don't feed. So what happens is they start stealing from their neighbors. They start doing, things they shouldn't do. They start kind of like trying to break out of that cage, right? The cage is the law, right? So the law is the thing that kind of attempts anyway to glue society together. And so whenever they don't get those things, then it's like if the rat was smart enough to know that, hey, in 5 hours I'm going to come feed it. It might be a little hungry, but it'll wait because it knows that you're going to come feed it. Well, if the rat doesn't know that knowledge, education, then it's going to start chewing at the cage and all this stuff, to use that analogy. So I think those are the two biggest correlation or factors that correlate with crime in this society that I can think of. I'm not going to go too much more in depth, but that's my take on it. And I think that there's a lot of, just depending on where you are, what I know there's, for example, there's places in different like, for example, there's a place right up north of where I live called Porter, and it's like a meth I guess capital, or I guess you could call it like a meth town. And it's like there's tons of meth up there, and there's meth heads and there's meth dealers, and so it's just kind of like a concentration of I guess a lot of things. So I guess it just depends on where you go. Like it doesn't really different places are gonna have different vibes, different troubles or whatever. Can we talk about McDonald's garlic chicken sandwich? Yes, I like that topic way better. So
definitely gets me out of hot water with my job.
The texture of the crispiness is just so good, but then you realize that it's rubber and it's not actual chicken. And then you get a little depressed inside, but then you taste that cheese melting in your mouth, and then you're just happy again. You forget all about the fact that you're not eating real food. It's like the McDouble, it's like they just recycle old tires and stick it in a bun, and it's the best tire you've ever had. But how much do I bench? How much do you bench? He's asking.
I have no idea.